worship together in this beautiful space with these beautiful windows and wonderful acoustics. You don't even need a mic for the joys and concerns. That's impressive. And this is your faith home, a place full of history, hopes, and possibilities. I'm reminded that we gather here from many different strands of life, and we are immersed now in what the late American philosopher of religion, William Ernest Hawking, described as a time location in the stream of history. He writes in 1937, "Accept one's time location, breathe in with shared memories and hopes, the contamination of tradition. Become defined as people of this issue, of this today's emergency." And 2018 in the United States certainly presents a myriad of challenging issues, if not emergencies, in our society, within our religious communities, and in our individual lives. Issues like poverty, race relations, the rights and safety of LGBTQ people, and the urgency of climate change and the depletion of natural resources, to name a few, truly need to be resolved. The question is, and always has been, how do we put our best efforts behind any one or more issues in order to effect lasting change? How do we turn this piece or that piece of injustice that we find in the world around? Now, as Unitarian Universalists, we have a tendency to gather copious amounts of information to study, to reflect upon, and to discuss endlessly. We grapple with how best to respond individually and as communities of faith to the pressing problems we face. We do fairly well at owning and expressing our moral outrage, whether we do that in public or whether we do that in private, closed quarters. For sure, there's plenty of work to do because we believe we are morally obligated to act, lest our silence and inaction makes us appear to be, or we become, more complicit. So, for instance, in 2017, our UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, released a statement of conscience on escalating economic inequity. And it has a long and well-defined list of possible actions that individuals, congregations, state legislative ministries, and our denomination might take. And in June this year, delegates at our General Assembly endorsed an action of immediate witness calling for solidarity for water protectors and indigenous people whose environment, agency, and existence are being threatened by colonization and resource extraction. And in both of these cases, strong statements, carefully worded, carefully vetted, come up through the democratic process. I wonder, how are we actually taking action once the ink is dry? How are we doing at actually building those relationships of solidarity with indigenous people in our area? I myself struggle with the realization from time to time that I may be more in love with the whole process and the heaviness of advocating for change than I am in actually rolling up my sleeves and involving myself in making change happen. It can be so comfortable to stay with the words and the reading and keep on top of the news and collect the latest data and stories. And stories are important. And it can be comfortable to sit back and admire and applaud the people on the front lines who are taking risk, putting their bodies on the line, standing in public protest and witness, and engaging in acts of nonviolent civil disobedience on our behalf. Sometimes it seems so much more comfortable to sign a petition or write the check or support a cause or an organization or even fundraise for a bail fund than to put ourselves, our bodies, our lives, our lifestyles, our resources on the line. The danger lies in positioning ourselves only as the supporters, the benefactors, the do-gooders, the donors, who feel good doing some good, but fail to realize that our generosity doesn't change the system. That's why I think the words of Stephen Schick in today's reading are so important. He wrote, this phrase, change not charity, can be dangerous because we risk overlooking the necessity of bold acts of compassion which ease suffering. We can't separate those from the passionate cries for reform and transformation. Yes, we do need to rebuild the dangerous Jericho Road and make the roads and sidewalks of America today, where people are assaulted and stricken down for their race, religion, or sexual identity, safe again. And yes, we cannot leave behind those who have been beaten and robbed by injustice. And that's why our Unitarian Universalist clergy and others were in the West Desert of Arizona last week, providing humanitarian aid, replenishing caches of water for refugees migrating so that America could be safe again for them. That's why UU churches around the country are providing sanctuary in their buildings for those at risk, making America a safe haven again. As people of faith, we endeavor to make real the beloved community, a kingdom of heaven writ large on earth. We want that life-affirming, hope-giving community where all are valued, respected, and have their needs met. We want that community where justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like an everlasting stream. And the problems we face to get there are complex and complicated. The best ways forward are often unclear or difficult to agree upon. It does take time and patience, neither of which seem to be abundant these days, to rebuild and make unjust quarters safe again. And so it's easy and it's natural that our resolve may waver. In this country, we have dreamed of the beloved community before. And it occurred to me when I spent a week on a personal study retreat at a spirituality and education center run by the Sisters of the Humility of Mary that I had chanced upon such a beloved community. I admit the setting was what had attracted me. They have a campus and a working farm of about 750 acres, a beautiful chapel, magnificent outdoor labyrinth in the earth, and an emphasis on ecological education and eco-spirituality. This was the perfect tranquil setting for a week of quiet study. These Catholic sisters don't wear habits, and they're engaged in the world, working as educators, administrators, healthcare professionals, and other jobs. And they have a very well-developed prayer life and are living out their vows of servant leadership. They are also quite progressive social activists, I was delighted to discover, from their statements and displays about the rights of women, their work with immigrants in Florida, and the missions they run in Haiti and Central America. And I also discovered a radically modern theological underfooting that I hadn't expected as I observed other sojourners there for the Symphony of Love Unfolding retreat, which was on cosmology, ecology, and the cosmic Christ. Admittedly, I was a little shy about talking about myself. Now, with my hair color and my short hair and my ordinary clothes, I really did fit in. A lot of people thought I was. So I was a little shy, really, coming out as a Unitarian Universalist, because I didn't want to risk being branded a heretic. You know, we've had that happen before. So we would exchange smiles, and our conversations would maintain a respectful distance. But I could feel a connection growing, because there is a connection that happens in the heart between people, even when the mind and the words that we use are not precisely the same. There's a connection there that tells us that we are kindred souls on a journey, and beings within a universal heart of love that is continually carried forward. And those are their words. Surprise thing. And while I was there on this study retreat, I was finishing a book that I have started called Overrated. And the subtitle of that book reads, "Are we more in love with the idea of changing the world than actually changing the world?" That's what caught my eye as I was reading some book reviews, and that question grabbed me in the gut, the way that words can do when they jump off the page, and it sounds like they're just written for you. So I got the book. I was curious, and always a spiritual seeker. I wondered, well, what might I learn from the direct experience of this religious leader? The author, Eugene Cho, the first-generation Korean-American immigrant, is the senior pastor at a Christian multicultural church in Seattle, Washington. And it was very clear from what I had read that he was living a life of spiritual discipline, prayer, contemplation, and surrender to the call of servant leadership, much like the sisters. So Cho tells the story of going on a mission trip to a remote village in Burma and struggling with the dire poverty that he witnessed and the needs, especially at a makeshift school, which could not retain its teachers because it couldn't pay them. He learned that $40 a year, not a month, not a day, a year, would fund one teacher's salary for the year. Like so many others, he asked himself, what can I do? But you see, he didn't just search the web and vet some possible charities and then check the balance on his bank account like I might do. No, what he did was to turn to his holy text, the scriptures, the Christian scriptures, and he cultivated silence. He gathered facts, he studied more silence. He discussed things with his wife and spent a lot of time in prayer. Meanwhile, he's running the church. And he waited expectantly for quite some time for whatever God or Jesus or the scriptures or the small voice within inside himself would reveal. From this, he was moved to start the nonprofit One Day's Wages, whose aim is to alleviate extreme rural poverty. And he began making personal appeals to others and raising money. He felt the need, however, to lead by very strong example. So he and his wife came to the conviction to give up not a day's wages, but a year's wages, $68,000 at the time. And so, the family on board, they cut back their expenses, they delayed things they could. He sold his cherished blue Mazda Miata. That one was top. And then when they were $10,000 shy of their goal, he took a bold unilateral action. He put an ad on Craigslist to sublet the family home for 10 weeks. Something he hadn't yet discussed with his wife. He had interest immediately and negotiated a deal quickly, and then there he was, a man of great conviction and upstanding in the community, with only 48 hours' notice. He had to tell his wife and his 3 children, pack up a bag, one bag, and one toy each. We're going to be couch surfing and apartment crashing for 2.5 months, and we leave in 2 days. Now, one could pick some bones with his approach in his story, and one could pick some bones about his character and the level of sacrifice that he asked of others. I mean, I did. Certainly. He's pretty glad I wasn't the minister's wife. Or one could step back and take a larger, more expansive view of the story. How different is his statement, really, from the one Jesus made, saying to his disciples, "Sell everything and join me on the road where we'll spread the good news and do good deeds and heal the wounded and begin dismantling this unwieldy, oppressive empire." Cho's actions seem to confirm what philosopher William Hawking has observed. Indeed, no one has found their religion until they have found that for which they must sell their goods and their lives. Cho's story has lessons to teach us about taking bold stands, lessons about the importance of intent and impact, probably some lessons about communications and family systems, and definitely some lessons about dealing with the consequences of decisions. And so as we think about siding with love, about taking bold acts of compassion and justice-making ourselves, he offers up these 3 pieces of advice that form the basis of his own social activism and his ability to sustain being a change agent. His advice: shut up, listen, and pray. Maybe that should have been the title. I might not have picked up the book though. Shut up. We know we live in a noisy, overstimulated world and society. So turn off the news, the Twitter stream, the Facebook posts. Turn off the fake fights and the vitriol. Turn it all off to find silence and calm and stillness so that you can listen. Second thing, listen. Cultivate an attitude and practice of receptivity and expectation. Expecting to hear, not expecting what you might hear or receive. Listen to the wisdom of the ages. Listen to the small voice inside. Listen to the heartfelt truths that you've heard others sharing with you. Third, pray. Pray to your God, pray to your goddess, pray to your deities or non-deities. Pray to your highest ideal, the source of creative love. But find a way to pray that suits you. There are so many ways to pray, and as Rumi, the 13th century Muslim poet and Sufi mystic, says, there are so many ways to kneel and kiss the ground. Being in nature where we encounter the all of life works for me. Walking a labyrinth, creating art, movement, studying sacred scriptures or sacred music, sacred arts. One thing I think about with the prayer, it's something that comes to me often, and it's a phrase of the unison affirmation that I recited so many times in my home congregation. And that phrase is, service is our prayer. I think that's a beautiful, beautiful statement of belief and intention. Service is the prayer of the congregation. Yet this does not replace nor negate the need for us to have our individual, well-developed practices of prayer and centering. Prayer offers us ways of finding sustenance, strength, courage, solace, and comfort as we face the challenges of our daily and communal lives. Prayer calls us to return to the places where we are hurting, where our doubts fester, and where we go to mend our souls and our relationships. In prayer, we can lick our wounds, and we can cry our tears of grief and frustration. And it's there where we can gather strength and sustenance for the journey making by aligning ourselves with the creative force of the world, whatever that may be for you. Are we, you and I, as moved to action as Eugene Cho, who was convicted by God and by Jesus and his scripture? Are we, you and I, as moved to action as the sisters of the humility of Mary, convicted by the Spirit of Mary and their vow of servant leadership? As Unitarian Universalists gathering in community here and elsewhere, discerning our way forward, I ask, what does it take for you to be convicted by creative love into action? What does it take? Can you risk afflicting your own comfortable self in order to comfort the afflicted? What are you willing to do or to risk to remedy an injustice? What comes after signing the petition, writing the letter, or making a donation? Tell me, how is it that you intend to bring charity and change to the world, to turn the world around? Tell me, are you ready to be changed as well? Let's sing. 1074, Turn the World Around, in the Key hymnal.
And we're going to take all the repeats. So that means every time you see 2 lines and 2 dots, go back and sing the next set of words. Please rise in body and spirit. We're going to sing.
Each week, we make an offering from the bounty we are blessed to enjoy.